Hey, Kevin Musgrove. So, thanks for taking a little bit of time and chatting with my current students and
Of
potential
course.
students. We'll start out with why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And as part of that introduction, tell me what you already told me, which I think is super cool, kind of your living situation.
Yeah. I was at Ranken from 2014 to 2016, and out of Ranken, I started a job in August after that school year. So from May to August, it took me to land that job. Landed a job, and I've been there since. I've been a developer, and since September of 2021, I've been kind of traveling around, working remote. Lived in Phoenix for like 6 or 7 months, and then now I've been in Denver since January.
Yeah, I find that super cool. So many people just want to be able to work remote and travel the
Yeah,
United States, and
yeah, I don't blame them.
that
Yeah,
sounds
it's been fortunate for sure
cool.
that I was able to gain trust at my job that they would let me do this.
And who have you been working with the same employer ever since graduation?
Yeah, it's a IT firm called or IT consulting company called ATB Technologies.
Yeah, I saw that on your LinkedIn. ATB Technologies.
Yep.
And so, what can you elaborate a little bit on what they do?
Yeah, so they're pretty much a IT department for small and medium-sized companies. So not all companies have an internal IT department. They sometimes outsource. Sometimes that makes more sense, especially if you don't have good connections in that realm because you're putting all your faith into these people that run your IT division or IT department. And if you hire people that don't know what they're doing, and it's not uncommon for people to exaggerate in interviews on their technical abilities. So that's happened quite a few times where we came in after they've already had one or two guys that just did band-aid fix after band-aid fix, and just it becomes a mess. And we kind of come in and take care of that. And then sometimes it's just for small projects, one-offs, and then a lot of times it's month-to-month contracts where we do their help desk, we do their network, we do their infrastructure, software, which is what I'm on.
Nice. How big is your team of software developers?
It's three of us.
Okay, so you're a small team,
Yeah, small team.
and
Yeah, the
and
company
you've
total
written
is 20.
software for a variety of companies now because of this consulting.
Yeah, that was a big selling point to me on this position, was that I wouldn't be doing .NET and SQL every single day, even though there is benefits to that because you become very good at that one thing,
Yeah,
and that one thing can get you a lot of money.
yeah.
And with me, I wear a lot of hats, and I have to jump from C# to React to regular JavaScript to SQL to VB. I have to do all these different things because we get a client and they've been doing this for 20 years, and now I have to add to it or fix something
So
or create something.
I kind of take notes. Sorry to interrupt. I take notes.
No,
I
no.
want to I want to reiterate the languages that you just rattled off. C sharp, JavaScript, Visual Basic,
Yep, yep. And
SQL,
React.
and React.
Yep. Yeah, that's my favorite, React.
React is your favorite. Interesting. We just implemented React in our curriculum. Why is React your favorite?
So the community, for one, is phenomenal. Like, you'll look up anything, any generic, how do I do this? And you'll find 10,000 examples. Like, it's wild how much the community is there. Like, they're so active still. And a
Yeah.
lot of languages are like that, but it's just really good with that. And then the node modules that you have access to, like, you can use those with a lot of languages, but React is definitely one that you'll see on most sites when you're like doing it getting started. There'll be like pretty much almost everybody now has a React getting started, like
Yeah.
if they're front end development.
That's cool. That's cool. So you started right out of high school at Rankin
Mhm.
and graduated, and so you're still a young guy. I believe you told me you're 26 now.
Correct.
So you've been in the industry for 6 years.
August will be 6 years. Yeah, 5.5.
Man, that is cool. So why should a young person follow in these footsteps of what you've done? Why should a young person get into this industry?
I think there's a lot of potential. I think there is a lot of flexibility too. Like from my example, that I was able to start working in the office and then gain trust. And clearly, what we do can be done remotely. It's just not always preferred by everyone that works with you. But I was able to obtain that, and then also it can pay pretty well. It's a very it's a it's pretty fun too at points. The reason I ended up taking your class over networking, which is what I was going there for, I went to Ranken thinking I was going to take that Cisco class, but that first week or so, you guys let us kind of dabble in a few of them, and then you guys pitch your classes, and you sold it to me. And a big reason of that was I wasn't going to just have to troubleshoot and maintain things my whole life. I was going to be able to create things, and that spoke to me. I like that idea of being able to create something, and it is cool. Like when you get to start on a project that no one else has touched yet, and you just get to see it turn into something, it's pretty cool. So it's fulfilling too. But then there are times where you're looking at code that some guy wrote 15 years ago and trying to piecemeal it together. So there's ups and downs.
Cool.
But overall, I don't regret it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I really like how you answered that with not only troubleshooting, but being able to create things that don't exist.
Correct. And you can technically do that with networks, but it's not the same. It's really, you don't get to put your like finishing touches on it. You don't get to put your, I don't want to say personality, but like you into it. You don't get to put your ideas into it.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, you talk about you work for one company and you do software projects all around town, so to speak. And so do you have any cool projects that like really stand out? Like you probably, I doubt you've made self-driving cars, but you know what I mean? Something that kind of like stands out as like a cool project that you worked on.
Nothing in the realm of cars that drive themselves.
Yeah, maybe that's next. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. A lot of it is everything I've done pretty much has been internal stuff. So it's not client facing, which I really like because CSS and HTML is my least favorite, and it was during school too. I don't like the move this text box 4 pixels or round the corners. I'm not a big fan of that. I like the logic. I like the back end stuff.
Yeah.
So what I get to do, I actually really like. I get to make pages that don't necessarily look the best always because it's for a guy in a warehouse to manage inventory, or it's something that isn't appearance isn't necessary.
Yeah. You're just making software that people can use to make their jobs better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Or even make their jobs almost irrelevant. I've done that a couple times, and I've even felt bad about doing it. Kind of like I feel like this is gonna take too much of your work away.
There's a South Park episode about they took our jobs.
Yeah, they took our jobs.
So what's a day like in your life? In the software developer role.
So, since I started working from home or in the office?
Well, today, since you're working remote. You're in Denver doing software projects for assumingly companies in St. Louis.
Correct. Yep. So I start my day at 7 a.m. and then what I basically get to do is on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I typically have some meetings that I have to sit through and do work either on the side or after or before, stuff like that. But then today I was free all day. All I have to do is my tasks basically. And with software, it's kind of hard to estimate the time. on everything because you could run into 3 problems or it could work the first try, and it's very different time to time. So it's pretty flexible on task. Like the time that I get to complete tasks is pretty flexible. So I don't constantly feel like my feet are on the fire or like that I'm falling behind or anything like that. So that's pretty nice. I mean, it's pretty much, I've gotten to the point where I get stuff handed to me and I give it back and it's just a rinse and repeat. Like I don't get micromanaged. I don't get my hand held. I got thrown in the deep end.
Yeah. So how many tasks might you be working on a given time? Like how many to-do lists do you have to check off, How many check boxes?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's around 5.
Around 5?
So. Yeah.
And so you mentioned meetings and coding and development. So what percentage of your job is spent coding versus in meetings?
70 to 80% is coding, and then the rest is probably meeting.
Okay. And is it a standard 40-hour work week, or do you have to put in longer hours? It just depends.
Pretty much standard 40-hour work weeks, and I'm pretty lucky with not having to work when I'm not working. I don't know how lucky everyone else is. I can't speak on that since I've only had this one job, but when I hit Windows L and lock my computer, like it's pretty much locked for the weekend or locked for the night.
Okay, so you're not on call taking emergency, IT support things and like that.
Mm-hmm. No.
That's nice.
Yeah, because most of our clients are St. Louis based, so most of them close shop and they don't work after hours either, so we don't have to deal with that very much.
Yeah. So, you mentioned that you graduated in May and it took you 3 months to find your first IT job.
Yeah, I did probably 4 or 5 interviews. All of them were awful. It's going to be an awful experience, but just get through it. Just go in there and feel dumb, and eventually you're going to get somebody that sees something, or they want a developer that doesn't have any bad practices or bad habits. Like someone coming straight from school hasn't been doing something for 20 years the wrong way. That's a huge benefit, that they don't have to fight with you to do it their way. They can just teach you all their bad habits, essentially.
So you were able to land that first job with a lot of hard work and persistence.
Yeah, you just have to keep going. Like there were several interviews where I walked out and it was like, that was the worst 40 minutes of my life. 5 people just grilled me, put me on a whiteboard and had me write code out, which all I had ever done is type it with IntelliSense, so that was pretty difficult. And then the job that I ended up landing, they told me, hey, bring in your laptop and show us what you've been working on. And that was a totally different game changer, because then I could take the time and prepare. It wasn't, give me the code that would solve the Fibonacci sequence, or the FizzBuzz, all these little coding things that they have you do. And they're easy on a computer, but man, as soon as you have to write that out in front of 4 or 5 people, it's a different
nerves.
It's a different game.
Nerves. So it took a little bit of practice to get good at interviewing.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, Concero is the consulting firm that I used, and they actually brought me in to their building and interviewed me to interview with the company that I got a job with, basically, just to see if I would even be a potential match. And that kind of helped too, because they knew their interview process, so they kind of give you a little bit of help, with this is what's important to them, stuff like that.
So what tips would you give? I mean, you mentioned Concero being a staffing agency. What tips would you give? Because the message of, hey, it took a lot of hard work and even some failed attempts of interviews. Like, what tips would you give current students to have to get their foot in the door?
So one thing I did, I don't know if you remember it, but I made a pretty cool looking resume. It was not a white piece of paper with black text. It looked like you made it in like Photoshop or something like that. And I spent the money too to go print that out on nicer paper. And every single interview I went to, they were like, your resume stood out like no other. You know, like we had a stack of 50 resumes and yours was the only one that caught our eye.
Nice.
So that is one thing that you can do to kind of help set yourself apart, make your resume look really good. Don't beef it up too much, be honest. And then work on stuff outside of school. Don't just do the bare minimum. Go on YouTube and start following tutorials from point A all the way to the end. You know, like just follow tutorials and have an arsenal of code and projects. Even if they're dumb little simple things like adding tasks to a list or, you know, just demonstrating fundamentals. If you bring that into an interview, even if they don't ask you, I wish the last interview I went on was the only interview I brought my laptop. And I wish I would have done that on every interview. And they're like, hey, can I just show you guys some of the stuff I've done? What I've worked on? Because I think if you show that you did all of this on your own, that's the guy they want. They want the guy that does the work and then goes home and does it for fun too.
Yeah.
You know?
So if I summarize what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, building out not only a portfolio from your schoolwork,
Mm-hmm.
but building a portfolio of basically side practice, side
Yes.
projects.
And you can mix the two. You can take code from one or the other, or you can take ideas from one or the other, but just have some stuff that wasn't forced on you. You know, just see what you like and see where it takes you type of thing. You know, like just start looking on YouTube for like little JavaScript games like Snake or, you know, just little things like that.
So really building out that portfolio. So cool. Thank you. So kind of next up is, you know, what tips would you give around salary expectations in this industry? Like, what tips would you give getting your foot in the door and then after you get some experience?
I would say don't make that your number one priority. Like
Yeah.
if say you'd be lucky in this position, like it might not happen, but say you have two offers and one is paying slightly more than the other. That shouldn't be the only metric. You should try and get a sense on the people that you're interviewing with and just their process and just try and find the best fit for you because you have all the time in the world to make more money. You know, if you make $5,000 more a year and you hate your job relative to the other position, like it doesn't seem like that's a good idea to me. But in ballparks, you could probably expect to make anywhere from 40 to 60,000 probably out of school, starting out.
Yeah, I mean that's consistent with what I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, it just depends on where you go and what you're willing to do. You know, because some of those higher paying jobs, you're not going to be able to stop working at 5 p.m. You know, like that might not be a thing. So there's just work-life balance. You know, there's just other things to think about too.
Yeah. Good. So, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? I guess the main question is this your forever industry, or do you maybe down the road, do you see yourself switching industries, or?
I think if I were to continue to work for somebody, that this would be my forever industry. I don't think I would ever go work for somebody else and do something other than development. But if I were to accumulate enough capital to not have to work for somebody else, I might not do this, I might do something else. But I don't wake up every day and dread doing this. So I'm going to keep doing it until that changes maybe. But
yeah, cool.
Where I see myself in 5 years, that's a tough one. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm still developing.
Yeah, very cool. I appreciate the honesty. You know, one thing, Ranken's a pretty unique school in that we're very focused on an industry. You know, most of the students that come to Ranken know what they're coming for. You know, I know a lot of colleges aren't that way. You know, it's like I want to go to college and find myself, and that's not really how Ranken works.
Yeah.
But there's a across all colleges, there's a secret that I'll call it a secret, that the diploma is not a guarantee to an easy job.
No. Yeah. It's a piece of paper to get you in the door.
And that piece of paper is only going to help you with a lot of hard work, persistence, character. You fill in the blank, you know.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. It gets your
it's
foot in the
a
door.
piece of a puzzle that puzzle putting together will get you in the industry. It's a piece of the puzzle, but certainly there's more pieces to that puzzle. And I think your interview highlights that of like, look, I had to learn how to interview. I had to learn how to present myself and bring my laptop and show a portfolio and
Yeah.
work with a recruiter. And these were all, when I'm listening to you, like I know my class is probably not thrilled to hear that 10 jobs,
Yeah.
10
No,
jobs
I know.
weren't thrown at you just
Yeah.
because you graduated from a college. You had to work really hard, not only to graduate from college, but to find that job. But ultimately, looking at you, you've been in the industry for 6 years and you're 26 years old.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's a position that people want to get to.
Yeah.
And so put all
Yeah.
those pieces of the puzzle together, and that's how you found your success.
Yeah. That piece of paper is definitely a foot in the door, and it shows them that you can complete something. So both of those are great to have on your side. But
When you say
they're
a foot in
gonna
the door,
want-
you mean the the interview door.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
They will be much more likely to have you interview if you have that piece of paper, and it shows them that you completed something. And at
Yeah.
Ranken, it shows them if they're St. Louis. I don't know how much, like outside of St. Louis or Missouri, companies know about Ranken, but the ones that are in St. Louis know that it's held at a higher standard. You know, you're pretty much work ready at that point. If you passed Ranken, you should be able to hold a job because they hold you at the same level of standard.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I like your interview, man. I like the way you answered those questions because they're honest, and you know, I think that that's a good message to hear. I'm gonna open up to my class. What questions do you guys have for Kevin? The secret behind these interviews is that my class has been getting one of these a week, so they've seen a lot of these interviews. Yeah, John.
What kind of like projects on the side that you've done on your own?
Sure.
Like stuff that you can't necessarily, things that you've done with other businesses, but stuff you just kind of done.
You're gonna have to repeat that.
Yep. The question is, what side work have you done on your own outside of school?
Yeah. So when I was going to my interviews, I had a few things under my belt. One, I had an Android phone at the time, and we had learned a little bit of Java, and I took a little bit of that knowledge and a bunch of YouTube and made a calculator app on my phone that also did like percentages and stuff like that, just so I could pull that out on interviews too and show them that. Because that is something I did too before with my laptop, and a lot of them really liked that. They thought that was cool, but it wasn't enough, but it was still just something I could show them, And so I had that, so that's not a bad idea to just do a really simple Java Android app, and then also just a very simple game. Like I had a snake game, like I mentioned earlier, that was a pretty useful tool to bring out too.
Cool. Thanks, Vinny.
So I've been told with employers that, the more like personal projects you do, the better, because it shows that you care, you're not just doing the bare minimum. But like, does it matter what, like let's say the job you're going for is JavaScript, but all the projects you've done are in HTML. Like, can you still show them that, or do you think
Yes.
that's a good idea?
Absolutely.
Like the more languages you have, even if you're not applying for that position.
Yeah, absolutely show it to them. It does not matter. Like they just want to see that you actually like this. Don't make them think you're doing this for a paycheck. That's not a good sign. do this because you want to do this, you know?
And I'm going to add one layer in there is be genuine about it. You know, if you're passionate about something, that will ultimately come through naturally. You don't have to go into an interview and say, I'm passionate about coding if you're honestly not.
Just show them.
So be genuine about it. Put in some extra work and say, look, I've worked really hard. I enjoy this. You know, I'm going to school for it, and look what I built.
And make it clear to them, like, hey, these are some of the things I've done in school, but these are the things I did on the side. Like, no one told me to do this stuff. You know, this is just for fun. Stuff like that.
Without a doubt, those things help. And
I think they would actually like that you know other things too. Like if you're interviewing for a C# job and you have a bunch of little projects that you did in JavaScript, that's not going to hurt you. A lot of that, the fundamentals all just go together. You know, you learn the fundamentals in C#, you know the fundamentals in JavaScript. You just don't know the keywords.
Good tip. Good tip. Kevin, I think you offered some really great advice, some really great tips. I think this was a little bit different style interview, but I thought it was great, man.
That's good.
Yeah, I think it was good. Any other questions from the class? Any last words of advice or words of wisdom?
You're gonna get discouraged and you're gonna feel like you're not good at it probably at times, but everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
And you either sink or swim, you know. Worst case scenario, you go get a different job or it'll work out.
Worst case scenario, you swing, and then it depends. Do you try again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learn from your mistake.
That's something that as our society, you know, we should all be comfortable with failure, and unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
You know, but you're far from a failure. You are ultimately a success out of the program. Congrats on your 6 years in the industry, and I'm proud of you, man. Way to be.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for answering some questions, and thanks for talking to my class.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, man. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.